In 1939, the British Navy was still the most powerful in the world, with the largest worldwide network of fortified bases and arsenals. An imperial fleet, planetary par excellence. The military budget allocated to aviation, and especially to the army, was tiny in comparison. The Royal Navy had its status confirmed, but at the same time capped by the Treaty of Washington, which defined its tonnage limit of 500,000 tons. As it did not cease its shipbuilding during the Great War, its forces included a large number of cruisers, line ships, and even destroyers dating from the Great War or the pre-Washington. It was only for liner ships that the 10-year moratorium was required. The only exception to the treaty, even though very precisely designated, were the two battleships of the Nelson class whose construction was too advanced for demolition. This treaty greatly weakened the Royal Navy since it couldn't replace outdated battleship, which is the backbone of the fleet anymore. The battle cruisers had seen their conversion into an aircraft carrier, and only 3 survivors of that age remained in service as such. The Hood, pride of the British Navy, the Repulse and the Renown were a little older, but fast and with formidable armament. The battle cruisers of Admiral of the Fleet David Beatty, engaged during the Battle of Jutland in May 1916, had shown such poor performances that they had been discredited by a large part of the Admiralty. Nevertheless, the concept of a considerable artillery with a high speed remained topical. And indeed the new generation of battleships called Rapids was on the drawing boards as early as 1918. The great majority of them were never finished or converted into aircraft carriers. It was not until the second half of the 30s that the fruits of this naval thought came to fruition in practice. In 1935, the London Naval Treaty redefined and relaxed the rise of some fleets such as the Kriegsmarine and the Japanese Navy and broke the Washington Treaty, albeit to conform with the latter. The super dreadnoughts of the King George V class built on the eve of the war were under-equipped with low-caliber main artillery. In fact, the essential part of the home fleet was assured by the 10 venerable battleships of the Great War, whose potential remained formidable, and they showed it amply in the Mediterranean. In 1937, a new engineering department attached to the Royal Navy was working to make aircraft that had remained prototypes practicable. They were going to give the first radars and sonars of the fleet, and thus a decisive advantage at the beginning of the war. Outside Germany, only Germany was at the level, followed by the US Navy. As we have seen, the relative shortage of battleships was compensated by the modernization or even overhaul of these vessels, compounded by a large number of new cruisers, whose backbone was represented by the large buildings of the county class, assisted by a myriad of light cruisers.